We start on the doctor strikes. I was just reading some of our comments. Donna, ban them from striking. Diane, doctors should not be allowed to strike. Ray, if or when the junior doctors go on strike, sack them all. It is clear that public opinion doesn't like this strike. On the other hand, for the government taking a hard line when they need to get waiting times down, it's not clear a big fight with the doctors is quite what they want.
Well, I think what's so interesting is as you just said there, how public opinion has changed, because I think when we last saw a big wave of industrial action, and it wasn't just doctors, it was teachers as well, it was a lot of people in the public sector, I think there was a lot of sympathy and empathy because of the cost of living crisis, and a lot of public sector wages had really been held back. And look, there's no denying there's been a squeeze on a lot of people's living standards. You know, it doesn't feel like your money goes far enough anymore in terms of how things have gone up. But they're now called resident doctors as well. They did get a decent pay rise. It's not to say that they've had full pay restoration that they want. And now I think the public have got a slightly different attitude. I mean, certainly with my radio listeners, they're sympathetic to what the doctors are saying. But I think people are beginning to feel, not massively, but just slowly, things are slightly beginning to be turned around in the NHS. Waiting lists are beginning to fall, and we're seeing a direction of travel. And I think the feeling is if there are these strikes now, that's just going to set everything back.
The impact it's going to have. Well, NHS England have said use services as normal, but we've already got people getting in touch. Chris has got in touch to say I can confirm operations have been cancelled at NHS QE Birmingham. You know, it is bound to have some sort of an effect, isn't it?
Of course, it will definitely have an impact. And I think you hear it from sort of leaders across the health service, just almost begging with the resident doctors, saying, please don't do this. You know, we collectively all want to start turning the NHS around, and the health secretary, I think, is not spoiling for a fight, but he is going to be quite tough. Look, there just isn't a lot of money around to pay extra sort of money at the moment. I think they're looking at creative things, pensions, student loans, things like that. But I think they want to try and reach a deal, but there isn't a huge amount of money.
No, we had Michael Gove on the programme on Monday saying, but the thing is, the BMA has now become a more hard-left organisation. They are picking a fight with the government of the day. They want the conflict, and maybe the government feels that there's just no choice but to fight back.
Well, I think what's really telling is that Robert Winston, Lord Winston, who I sit alongside in the House of Lords, probably one of the most eminent doctors in this country, he last week actually resigned his membership of the BMA over this. Now, Robert Winston is somebody who stands up for doctors, he stands up for the medical profession. He's one of the most loved medics and trusted medics in the country. And even he said to the leadership of the BMA, please don't do this now. You know, this is going to, break trust between patients and doctors. So I think where Wes Streeting is on this is really interesting, because one of the first things that Wes Streeting did when he became Health Secretary, and he made a great start, he said, I'm getting on the phone this weekend, I'm going to sort out the strikes with the doctors. And he did. And in fact, he got quite a lot of criticism from people saying, you know, you've caved in too quickly to these junior doctors. They got relabelled resident doctors because they're not junior doctors, they're very senior doctors. But now I think it's going to backfire on the leadership of the BMA to go in too hard.
Very interesting. Now, good news, Aisha. 15 minutes ago, he was in bed asleep. And you wouldn't possibly... You couldn't tell.
We've rustled up a replacement.
In no way. Is that your pyjama top you're still wearing?
There's a whining...
You need to tuck it in.
There is a whining... Well, they told me they wouldn't film below the waist. There's a whining dog at home.
Oh.
I literally had a thrower in my hand.
Can somebody bring a brush for Lord
advancing towards the door.
I mean, I've got to say, your hair is sort of slightly,
Static.
It's fabulously tousled.
Yes.
People pay hundreds of pounds.
I'm very against this strike.
You're not striking today. Not
Thank
all,
you for joining
not all
us.
heroes wear capes. Some of them wear pyjamas.
This is a shirt.
Have you got your slippers on? He's even got shoes
No, I
on.
was told nobody was going to comment on anything.
Ed Daisy, can I just say to you, people pay hundreds of pounds to have their hair styled to get a look like that. I mean, it is brilliant. Film
amazing,
stars,
isn't it?
film stars spend hours in their makeup to get
and
that
he
look.
just woke up like this. I mean, what can he say?
I know, it's incredible, isn't it? Anyway.
Listen, we were talking about the doctor's strike with Aisha. So do you want to sort of, put forward what you're making of this? Because we were commenting on the fact that, the impact on services, the role that Wes Streeting has played in trying to sort this out.
I think the government's being very robust on this and got the right approach. I mean, there's a lot of briefing in the papers today about effectively saying, I'm sure Aisha's already said all this, the deal's on the table, they thought they'd got it agreed. The leaders of the BMA can't bring their committee with them, so it's really an attack on how the BMA have handled this, which I think is a sensible position for the government to take. And they wouldn't be in this position if they hadn't given them the huge pay rise a year ago. So I think to a certain extent they do hold the cards. I think they will carry public opinion with them.
Yeah, public opinion is clearly moving against.
Yeah. But it's interesting, isn't it, what the way through is in that case?
Well, the way through is for the BMA to see sense and to understand that they cannot simply demand whatever they want. The government has again briefed out the concessions it had made, or whether you call them concessions, but some of the things they'd put on the table, such as buying medical equipment and so on. I don't think they will get support for this strike. I think if the strike causes damage, God forbid if it leads to anyone suffering unnecessarily, then the BMA will continue to lose support.
And the iPaper today claiming cancer patients have faced crushing delays as a result of these strikes. And Aisha, is that how you see it then, that it is the BMA that is going to have to concede on this one?
I think what's happened is I think the BMA leadership is taking a tone that I think some of the sort of grassroots members of the BMA and long-standing members like people like Robert Winston, because I think for a lot of people, and I've got a lot of medics in my family, people don't tend to go into medicine because they're thinking of the money. They do it for really altruistic. That is not to say they don't deserve good pay and conditions, but doctors are often, when they talk about their pay and conditions, they're not just talking about it in a selfish way, they're also talking about the state of the NHS as well, in terms of good staffing levels, in terms of equipment, in terms of patient care. That's a huge part of the care that you have as a doctor. So I think one of the things that a lot of other doctors who are not part of the leadership are thinking is, look, we are starting to make progress in terms of there's a new 10-year plan for the NHS, there's a lot of investment that's gone into the NHS, so they're worried that they're going to put all of that at risk. And I do think the BMA leadership does feel quite kind of isolated from, I think, other parts of the membership, other parts of the profession, and, of course, patients and the public.
Very interesting.
I mean, I should give another perspective, I guess, which is, in order to start a bit of a debate, which is, what will the Tories or indeed the other opposition parties do about this? Will they portray Labour as having basically been suckers? You gave this massive pay rise a year ago. Everyone said, you're ridiculous, you're buying off a strike with money we can't afford. And look where it's got you. 12 months later, the doctors are back on strike.
OK, can I just give the counterpoint to that? Which is going to have a bit of a day, a bit of a rumble. People will say that, but it was the right thing to do because junior doctors, as they were known then, did have, a massive imbalance in their pay. So I think sometimes, you do the right thing, not just for the politics of it, you do the right thing. And I think Wes Streeting did do the right thing by giving those junior doctors at the time a really good pay rise because they deserved it.
What should the approach be of Kemi Badenoch? She's just done a reshuffle, brought James Cleverly back in, front of the Financial Times. She's going to model her leadership on state-slashing Argentinian president. She's going to vow to fight Labour tax rises, focus exclusively on the economy, but a smaller state. Cuts in public spending. Is that the right approach?
Well, it's got some attention. It's got a bit of coverage. Javier Milei, as we all know, the president of Argentina, is strong meat. And depending on your perspective, he's either been the absolute saviour of Argentina or he's been a complete disaster. He has had some significant successes, but at the same time, poverty has increased in Argentina as well. His stick is that this is strong medicine that will get Argentina
First Tory leader to choose an Argentinian as a role model.
Absolutely, there's a great irony there.
Wouldn't have happened 40 years ago when Margaret Thatcher was in charge.
I hadn't thought about that, actually. That's a very good point. But I think it's got her some attention. But I was reading this story today and I thought this is, to a certain extent, a gift for the Labour Party because the government can now say every time they are attacked for not doing enough on welfare reform and so on. They can simply turn to Kemi Badenoch and say, well, you're the Javier Milei of Britain. What are you going to slash and burn with your chainsaw? What kind of cuts are you going to make that's going to affect working people? So it's dangerous territory, but perhaps she thinks she has to make a strong statement in order to get attention, which is always the dilemma.
Do you think do you think her reshuffle is going to turn it around for her?
Well, I mean, she didn't pick me, so she's missed a huge opportunity.
Maybe she called too early.
Yeah, it's terrible, isn't it? No, I'm really pleased to see James Cleverly back on the front bench. I wanted him to be the leader of the Tory party. I think people like him. I think he's moderate. I'm glad.
Is this positioning for his return then?
Well, I think it's really interesting because, I mean, James Cleverly is very much the flag bearer for, I think, the sensible wing of the Conservative Party, like our good friend Lord Vasey, the kind of one nation person. And I think he felt quite sort of out in the cold. So it is interesting that he's chosen to come back. But look, I don't think this reshuffle is going to do a huge amount of work for Kemi Badenoch. There's a very interesting long read in the New Statesman this week, which is quite brutal about how badly things are going for the Conservatives.
He was very smart yesterday, though, James Cleverly. He said he's going to shadow Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister. He said she's really good and she's not being listened to by Keir Starmer, and that is a big problem for Keir Starmer. And I thought that was sort of...
Yeah, I mean, that's cute, but I think that to keep a broader eye on things... Conservatives did very badly at the last general election, got absolutely tanked at these local elections. If after the next set of local elections, which, by the way, I think will be difficult for Labour as well, there's big elections in Scotland and Wales, and if the Conservatives come last in all of those, then I think Kemi's time is going to be pretty numbered.
Can we take a look at the situation in Gaza? Because, you know, more than 100 international aid agencies are now warning about mass starvation there. We've seen the really upsetting images that have been coming out of there. I mean, Ed, what is it going to take to sort out this situation? David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, had talked about, you know, Britain could do more in the coming weeks if this isn't, if there isn't sort of a resolution on the way. But what that
I don't know what
like?
it's going to take. I mean, it's a horrific situation. We see the pictures. It's almost too ghastly to look at. But at the same time, you know, there is a massive problem with how humanitarian aid is being distributed, and it's very hard to get at the truth. We know that people are being killed as they queue to get food, whether it's Israeli troops, whether it's the mercenaries that seem to be employed to guard this food, whether indeed it's Hamas or indeed looters that are doing this. It's an absolutely horrific situation, and it's not working. Israel claim that lots of UN trucks are at the border of Gaza ready to go in, but they won't go in. So getting to the truth in this situation is so difficult. But I think there has to be some kind of ceasefire. This is an absolute humanitarian catastrophe now. I totally understand Israel's desire to defend itself, Israel's wish for complete security, but this has gone, I think, well beyond that now, and nobody wants to see what is happening every day in Gaza.
It's quite delicate for Keir Starmer now. You've got Sadiq Khan, Wes Streeting in Parliament on Tuesday, Emily Thornberry, head of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, loads of Labour MPs all saying you've got to recognise Palestine as a state. You can't say I'm for a two-state solution if Britain is still dragging its feet on this. Is there a danger of the government getting behind the curve, not looking like it's being sufficiently supportive of Palestine in its time of need?
I think the reality is that there is a massive amount of unhappiness about where Labour is on this. There's no question about it. But even if Keir Starmer did come out and say, let's recognise the state of Palestine, it's not going to change on the ground the situation that Ed has just talked about.
That's right.
We all agree that what happened on October the 7th was absolutely abhorrent. And Israel has the right to self-defence. But I think you look at what's happening now, and I think war crimes are being committed now. I think the level of starvation, the level of human misery, the number of people who are being killed, and it keeps happening almost every day, women, children being killed, maimed, made disabled while they're queuing for food or nutrition supplements. It's gone too far now. Now, in terms of whether, you know, one party recognised the state of Palestine, the reality is that there's basically three groups that can stop this. One is Netanyahu and his far-right coalition. The other group is the leadership of Hamas. By the way, I think neither of those want a peaceful solution. I think both sides kind of want to annihilate the other side. And Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the only person that has any leverage over this. So I would love us to go further as the Labour Party.
I don't think
it'll have any impact.
I think it is a red
whatsoever.
herring. I agree with you, and I think that you've got to get some kind of progress towards a ceasefire in Gaza. I was told yesterday that they were quite close to getting a ceasefire in Gaza, and obviously, let's not forget, from the Israeli government's perspective, getting the hostages back, dead or alive. They know that there are, I think,
although
20
a cabinet minister, Wes Streeting, raising it in Parliament, Wes Streeting with a very marginal seat, suggests that even if it won't make a difference, he clearly thinks politically this is...
Also, he has to do it for him as well in terms of his, as you say, his wafer-thin majority. And I understand that there is a conversation going on. But I think now the bigger conversation that I'm certainly having with parliamentarians and others is, and I think you see it in the media, you see it with commentators, I think the public opinion is tipping. I think everybody supports Israel's right to defend itself. But good-minded people are looking at the proportionality of what is happening. They are looking at the sheer numbers of people being killed and also asking the questions, is this going to make the world a safer place afterwards? No, it isn't.
With you. You should stay with us, as of course you will. Lord Vasey, thank you for kind of rushing in so early.
I'm off now.
No, you're actually staying with us.
Oh, good.
We're back to talk to the Cabinet Minister, and we'll see you again in a moment, and then at the end of the programme. Sir Keir Starmer is meeting India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, today to sign a trade deal which is reportedly worth £6 billion to the UK.
Well, we're joined now by the Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds. Good morning to you. So, obviously, good news about this deal. Critics, however, claiming it could make Indian workers cheaper to hire than British employees. The Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, has called this a two-tier tax system. Can you guarantee, then, that British workers won't lose out as a consequence of this?
Yes, I can absolutely guarantee that, and those comments from the Leader of the Opposition are categorically false, no question of that. But this is a historic day. It's a really important trade agreement for the UK. It's a huge win for British business, a huge win for British consumers. It means more tax coming into the exchequer as well, and that is always welcome. And this is a trade deal between the fifth and sixth largest economies in the world at a time when global trade is under pressure. It is the biggest deal the UK has done since Brexit. It is the best deal India has ever offered any country. There are so many parts to it, I couldn't describe them all, but if you take whiskey, India is the biggest whiskey market in the world. We're obviously the best producers of whiskey in the world. That tariff is 150%. That goes down to 40%.
OK, well, and just to go back, though, to this situation with the national insurance contributions, to explain, there's this row over the exemption, isn't there, so that the Indian short-term workers will be exempted from this, which, can you just explain this to people? Because the accusation is that it will mean that Indian workers are cheaper to hire than British workers as a consequence of this. Therefore, British workers could, in theory, be penalised because of that and undercut.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you were hiring a British worker, there would be no advantage in hiring an Indian worker. You'd pay exactly the same tax. You'd obviously pay higher charges for any foreign worker. You'd pay things like the NHS surcharge. There are provisions as part of this agreement where if you are temporarily on assignment from an Indian company, you're an Indian national in the UK, or a UK national in India working for a UK company, you pay into your own country's social security system rather than the destination countries for, in this case, a period of up to 3 years. Now, every foreign worker in the UK would get that for up to 1 year. We have these agreements with over 50 other countries in the world, so India's getting something which the EU already has, or Canada or Japan already has. But it is categorically false to say if you hired an Indian worker, it would be cheaper than a UK worker. We would never agree a deal like that. I would never agree a deal like that.
Isn't the real truth, Johnny Reynolds, that... but this is significant. India has always been very reluctant to agree trade deals, but the truth is that it's very, very small. Our trade with India is a tiny part of our trade, less than 3%, compared to America, 20%, and we're in a trade war with them, and the European Union, 50%, and we've got loads of barriers to trade which are reducing growth and prosperity with our main trading partners. So it's good for you to talk about the India deal, but really, there are other things where you need to put a lot more focus on America and Europe.
Well, the global trading system is under incredible pressure. The US agenda is part of that. And my job, our job as a government, is to make sure the UK navigates that better than any other country in the world, and that is exactly what we're doing. So the agreement we have with the US, still more to do on that, but better than any other country in the world has secured, improving the trade terms with the EU at the same time. A lot of people told me we had to pick between those two markets. They were wrong. We've proven that they were wrong. But when it comes to India, India is the fastest growing big economy in the world. India will be at least number 3 in the world in everything. That's demographics. That's the US, China, and then India, and maybe India overtaking some of those countries over time. So it's incredibly significant. Every other country in the world will be wanting to announce this trade deal today. But yes, alongside that, we're working on the US. We've had some big gains there, but more to do. Okay. Working to improve that relationship with the EU. I've got more aspirations as well. We're going to continue to be the country that navigates this best.
OK, just a sec. You know, we've got 24 hours now, haven't we, until the resident doctors' strike begins. And it is a thing that's on lots of people's minds because there's concern about how services will be impacted. NHS England saying to the public, use the services as normal. The BMA saying, though, that staffing levels will be unsafe. It's going to be dangerous. The NHS Confederation saying it's going to have a big impact on services. What is your message this morning to people as to what's going to happen tomorrow and for the next few days when this strike is on about patient safety and how they should be using the NHS?
Well, look, this action is totally unreasonable. There'll be no movement from the government on the considerable pay offer that's already been made. We want to work with resident doctors on a whole range of things to make the NHS better. We're seeing some real progress in the last year, but they had a 28.9% pay rise last year. That cannot be continued, I'm afraid. The message is very clear on that. In terms of how we will look after patient safety, in the past, you're right to say elective care has been cancelled to prioritise emergency care. But if you're someone waiting for instance, a cancer appointment, that might be very difficult for you. So we want to maintain those services where we can. That is what we are seeking to do. And I would just simply ask any resident doctor, work with this government. This is a pro-NHS government. Look what's happened on waiting lists declining since the election. Look what's happened on additional appointments. But we've got to look after the NHS as a whole. You cannot give one group of employees within the NHS the kind of request that we've received from them. We want to work with them. I think that's a good place to proceed. And
just to ask you about another issue, which is obviously hugely upsetting very many of our viewers, on the front pages of the papers, the tragedy happening in Gaza. David Lammy has been very critical of what Israel has been doing. But 2 days ago, your cabinet colleague Wes Streeting joined Sadiq Khan, the mayor, many Labour MPs, in saying now the government must recognise Palestine as a state if you really believe in a two-state solution. Is that something that you're willing to say to us today?
Yes, we're deeply committed to the recognition of Palestine as a state. I think we referenced it specifically in our manifesto, Ed. And look, what we are seeing in Gaza is intolerable. That is why, by the way, we've sanctioned Israeli cabinet ministers. It is why we've ended we've paused our talks on further trade cooperation. I myself have ended arms exports to Israel that could be used in Gaza. But I think, as your discussion covered at the beginning, we want that recognition of Palestine to be meaningful. I mean, right now, there is not a Palestinian state in existence to recognise in that sense. We haven't got political agreement between the two major Palestinian territories. So we are deeply committed to this. We want it to happen, but we want it to happen in a meaningful way, working with international partners and allies, so we get to a position where we can genuinely say this is that step to that two-state solution, which is essential for Israelis and for Palestinians too.
Jonathan Reynolds, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Your first interview of the day. We really appreciate it. Just very quickly, Aisha and Ed, what did you think of what he was saying there on Gaza? Is that going to work?
I think he's just been honest. I mean, I think there's definitely people that would like the government to go further. But even if Keir Starmer did exactly what everybody was pushing for, would it actually make any difference on the ground? And I think we're all moving into a position, most right-minded people are moving into a position, which is what we are seeing is completely unacceptable.
And I thought he was pretty unequivocal. I mean, he was basically saying, you know, it's got to stop in Gaza. There's no ifs or buts there. So, I mean, the
trade talks with Israel are now on hold.
Exactly. The tactics of trying to get that change is one thing, and Britain's influence is one thing. And as you said earlier, Donald Trump is the person who's going to make the difference. You said Donald Trump's going to make the difference. Is the only one who can make this happen. But I think the British government's position is clearly hardening.
Okay. And I think people do forget the government has banned, you know, a large number of arms sales. We also, the amount of arms that we send, you could argue get rid of everything, is very small compared to what we get. And they have sanctioned a number of and it's worth sort of pointing out that a lot of the Israeli government is very cross with what Britain has done. I wish we could wave a magic wand and make it all better, but we can't. Only 3 people: Hamas, Netanyahu's government and Trump can sort this out.